for preventative medicine, you don't want to bodybuild. I'm going to be 100% honest. Bodybuilding, like at the highest level, or strongman, or anything else that requires you to be, super, super large or super, super strong, is probably not the healthiest approach. What's up?
How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for jumping on the call. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime.
What time is it in Thailand right now?
It's 1 o'clock in the morning, but I'm always awake until 4 o'clock, so it's all good. Yeah, I'm on single man's time, even though I'm married.
Okay.
Wake up at 12, go to bed at 4, but it's
That's
a little bit easier to stay in touch with the Western world this way.
Yeah,
So it all works.
I really appreciate your lifestyle to be able to make time for this. This is going to be really awesome.
Anytime.
So my name is Steven Granzella. I'm the marketing manager. And for those that are joining us for the first time, we're on Marek Health's Instagram, as well as on Steve's channel as well. So Marek Health is a telehealth platform that focuses on preventative medicine and hormone optimization. We provide a concierge service that walks our customers from start to finish through the process, providing custom diagnostic lab panels, over-the-counter treatment options, as well as prescription treatment options with our partner providers. So we're all-encompassing, full package, one-stop shop, place to come and just get your full service for all your hormone optimization needs. And Vigorous Steve, you're not new to any of this whatsoever. So tell us a little about yourself and what you're doing and what you got going on.
So I started becoming interested in this fitness and bodybuilding lifestyle since the age of 15. And ever since then, I've been going actively to the gym and trying to learn about nutrition and training optimally, and slowly transitioning into the bodybuilding lifestyle. Then, of course, I went to university, finishing my degree, going into consulting. I was a financial business consultant for almost 6 years until the economic crisis of 2009 hit. So around that time, I kind of lost my job and I traveled for a year. And then I realized, I better do something with my passion, becoming a consultant to help people, reach their bodybuilding aspirations. So in my traveling, I realized that you can basically become your own boss. So I've been self-employed for the last 10 years now, and I settled in Thailand. And then I started a YouTube channel, started coaching people, started helping people worldwide, started helping my wife compete. And I'm finally here, having a YouTube channel where I can just actively share what I've learned over the last 20 years or so, trying to bodybuild as healthy as possible, that is. So it's been a fun ride. Yeah, and now we're collaborating with you guys. So that's very, very promising, because like Marek Health is one of the most forefront clinics in the United States that offers so many different services that I highly agree with. What I see a lot with HRT clinics is that they're so cookie cutter, over the counter, and offering these basic solutions for problems that men and women have. But in most cases, it's not really the solution that people need. And I see that you guys really go far above and beyond what is currently available in the United States to really help people. And that's what I'm about. And I'm very happy to see that this is what you guys are all about. So that's why I'm happy to go into this collaboration with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, we've been working together for a few months now, and you have your own custom panel, marekhealth.com/Vigorous. It's a ginormous panel. I know we're going to on a smaller one, but I mean, we were able to create a complete custom lab panel for you and for your audience and for our members.
Right.
So
it's a big one. So if you really want to be on top of your health, you can do the full lab panel. And of course, I think we're now working on a little bit of a digest panel that's going to be half price, with a little bit more easy to manage and less expensive markers. But you will still get an accurate representation of your health. But the more niche and not always required markers won't be in there, so you can save yourself some money in the process, but still stay on top of your health. So it will be a Vigorous budget panel in the near future. Yeah.
Very soon. Quick question. So you said you started bodybuilding at 15, or at least getting into fitness. What was your first? Did you have a first show, or Like, what was your big kickoff that kind of was?
No,
Like,
I mean, I never competed because I never thought I had the genetic makeup to be competitive. And back then, we didn't have men's physique, we didn't have classic physique. Like if you had classic physique, I probably would have done a show. But at that time, there was only bodybuilding, and that seemed so far ahead from what I was able to accomplish. Plus, we all know that open bodybuilding requires a decent amount of pharmacology, so that always turned me off a little bit. So I actually stayed drug free for 11 years, trying to make career, focusing on my consultancy, right, and making career that way. And then when that fell through, I realized, you know what, maybe now's the time to do my first cycle when I was 26 years old. So I really tried to pinpoint and piece everything together without the drugs. And then later on, when I made that leap, I realized that, well, there's a lot of misconceptions in the bodybuilding space about the pharmacology involved. And maybe it's not really required to do these crazy things. So, but at the time, again, we only had open bodybuilding. So I never really had the desire to compete because it was such a step to really get to that point. Yeah.
makes So you're constantly growing and evolving as a personal coach. Where do you get a lot of your information? You referenced a lot of studies, a lot of other videos, a lot of pieces of content. I mean, I would imagine like every year there's like either something new that's coming out or just something's just constantly evolving as it pertains to.
That's why bodybuilding is so much fun, because when you take a little bit of a time machine, you go back in time, you realize that a lot of things that bodybuilders were talking were half truth. At the time, we would consider them to be true. But a little bit later on, we learn a little bit more and we understand that it's not exactly true. And some things we just completely put by the wayside. So bodybuilding grows as the science grows, I would say. Sometimes bodybuilding is a little bit ahead of the science, and sometimes we're way far behind. So that's why bodybuilding is so much fun, because there's always something new to learn and, something to optimize, something to make better, or something to discard. And of course, now with the internet, like again, when I started, bodybuilding, the internet was small. And we would go to the library to read about training and read about nutrition. And now there's so much information that you really have to become good at sifting through it. So that's always the challenge for me. Like going to the gym, eating a ton of food and taking some performance enhancing drugs is easy. The hard part is piecing it together and doing it as healthy as possible. So that's one of the things that I really inspired to be like, is just trying to piece it together and then level up the community that way. That's why I started my YouTube channel. I just want to share what I've learned and better other people's journey through bodybuilding or through fitness.
Makes sense. So, well, let's touch on that a little bit more. You mentioned wanting to stay healthy. Like, what is the importance of preventative health screening and different, following different medical protocols as you maybe have dived into TRT, maybe you've dove into more bodybuilding routines? Like, what is the importance of all that?
So what I noticed, like in Holland, we have healthcare, and it sounds great on paper, but when you want to talk with your primary healthcare physician to do a test preventatively for a medical issue that isn't there yet, it's impossible because you're not sick yet. So if you want to keep yourself healthy, and preventative medicine is the only method to do that, right? It's preventative, but you need to have a healthcare system and patient care coordinators in a clinic and a hospital present, willing to provide that for you. So if you care about your health, preventative medicine is where it's at, because you're literally preventing yourself from getting sick. Now, of course, part of that is lifestyle choices. That ideally, you don't take performance-enhancing drugs, unless it's for like true medical required reasons, one of them being androgen deficiency. That's a legitimate reason to go on TRT. A lot of guys would like to go on TRT for, I don't know, maybe to optimize their lifestyle. It's not a true medical reason, but it's more for my performance reason. And then, of course, there's bodybuilding, which is far above and beyond of what is generally recommended. So for preventative medicine, you don't want to bodybuild. I'm going to be 100% honest. Bodybuilding, like at the highest level, or strongman, or anything else that requires you to be, super, super large or super, super strong, is probably not the healthiest approach. And still, if you want to go that direction, preventative medicine needs to be there so you can attack things and see things before they actually become worse. So, for example, blood work, right? It's one of the earliest detection methods of seeing something is going wrong. And whether you're drug-free or in hand, even when you're drug-free, it's important to do blood work, because a lot of kids nowadays, they want to be shredded for Instagram, young guys. And because of that, they don't have a good dietary model. They don't eat enough. They don't get enough micronutrients. And then they get androgen deficient, or their testosterone levels are low. And they might not realize that because they're always dieting. So they feel tired and lethargic because of the diet. But in reality, the diet is also making them androgen deficient. And blood work can determine that. And then on the flip side, when you're in hand, it's good to see that your cholesterol levels are maybe not so good anymore. So you can take preventative measures. Your liver enzymes are not so good anymore. You can take preventative measures. So blood work is probably the earliest step you can self-diagnose. And then if you can't self-diagnose, there's people who are specialized in analyzing blood work. So that's why it's so important to do preventative medicine and preventative analysis, just to make sure that you're ahead of what can potentially go wrong. And also to kind of, if you're into bodybuilding, to kind of shove it in your face, like, yes, you can look very, very big and strong, but it also comes with some side effects. So
what do you think, what are a couple of different like long-term instances where someone maybe does the TRT or optimized TRT route, then they can do the bodybuilding route? Is a lot of this stuff reversible? Like if someone goes into bodybuilding and goes the hardcore bodybuilding pharmacology route, it's potential life-altering circumstances there. Maybe even stop and retire. Is there?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you start. So, let's say you start TRT and bodybuilding, right? You start using testosterone replacement therapy or potentially other performance-enhancing drugs, but your testosterone levels were good, so you didn't need it medically, right? You did. Hopefully, people do a baseline test. I did my blood work every year in Holland, just to make sure that everything was going to track and that nothing was going wrong. Because again, even when you're drug free, you're asking a lot of your body, being a bodybuilder. So I saw my testosterone levels decline. But even when I did my first cycle, my serum testosterone was 630 nanograms per deciliter. So I had my baseline reading, right? Then I did performance-enhancing drugs for 10 years with a couple of PCTs in between. Then after the last PCT last year, I was able to restore my serum testosterone to about 600 nanograms per deciliter. But when I was 26, I didn't do anything for it. When I was 37, at 38 years old, I had to pull out all the stops. Literally everything. So that's the vitamin D3 and the magnesium and even icing the testicles, which is silly every time I talk about it, but it does have some merit to raise testosterone. Yeah, sure. So it's very straightforward. It's a freebie almost. You get an ice pack, you wrap it in a towel, and you strategically place that underneath your testicles for 20 minutes, 3 times per day. And every time I explain it, it sounds absolutely silly, but I have the blood work to prove that it works. And many people report that it works. So it's basically like when you have like pain in your knees or elbows and you do the hot-cold therapy to lower inflammation, bring new blood, lower inflammation, bring new blood. It's the same idea for icing the testicles. And it works. At that time, I did a post-cycle therapy. I was about 350 nanograms per deciliter. And then after a couple of weeks of doing that, I ended up at 600. Yeah. So that's insane. Yeah, and then of course there's other methods to increase your testosterone levels, like enclomiphene monotherapy or Gorilla Mind Sigma, which also raised my testosterone levels quite a bit. Even without icing the testicles, I still ended up quite high. So there's so many methods to restore testicular function, ACG monotherapy, one of them being. But it also depends on, again, if your testosterone was not sufficient before you started hormones, then you can't really expect them to come back. So if you need testosterone medically, it's probably better not to come off. And then you have to look into some sort of method to get your fertility going when you're ready to have kids.
Makes sense.
So, yeah, it really depends on where you are and how healthy you are, because I think that the antioxidant status of your testicles plays a part. And of course, your micronutrient intake, vitamin D3, magnesium, taurine, selenium, and carnitine, they all play a contributing role in fertility to a certain extent. So if you have all of that in place, and maybe you do a fertility protocol with ACG or HMG, then at least your fertility can come back, but maybe your testosterone levels won't come back. So yeah, it really depends on the individual.
Is fertility pretty much like off the table then if testosterone is in play, or is it?
No, I don't
Like,
think so. When you look at the literature, a lot of men, not all men, experience azoospermia, which is like there's no semen in there's no sperm in the semen, so that means that they're infertile. Not everybody experiences that. I'm not exactly sure what the percentages were in the studies that were performed on men using hormone replacement therapy, but not 100% were azoospermic. So there was still a decent amount of men that produce somewhat adequate sperm within their semen. Now, in my case, if I do TRT, I still have 20 million sperm per milliliter, but that's only on TRT dosages. As soon as I add in something a little bit more exotic, I'm azoospermic as well. So I do think that men on TRT that had good fertility before TRT or somewhat detectable fertility can sustain fertility or improve their fertility on TRT, but there needs to be something in place to stimulate spermatogenesis. Now, one of them can be aclomiphene, one of them can be ACG, one of them can be Clomid, one of them can be HMG, and icing the testicles might actually also help. So there's a multitude of, some guys, they do directly vitamin D3 on the scrotum. They say that helps. Wow. Or red light therapy. There's so many methods. And if one method doesn't work, you can always look at another method and just go by trial by error. And do you guys offer like a fertility test at Marek Health?
Yes, we offer it.
Okay.
We're going through us, and I believe we're working with another company to facilitate it all.
Okay, so that's good. So for the guys that are interested in increasing their fertility levels, right, after they've done their blood work and initial semen analysis, maybe one of your patient care coordinators can guide them through that process to optimize their hormone levels and optimize their fertility levels. I think you can do both at the same time. I think it shouldn't be an issue, but again, it highly depends on the health, the state of health of the individual. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the health of the individual. So if I'm looking to start TRT, is there a certain baseline of health I should consider to get into first? Like if I'm 25% body fat and maybe I only train 2 days a week, but I have low level, is that a big enough justification for me to jump on TRT in your head, or should I start to address some other issues?
I would start to address some other issues. So I mean, it's probably not the best analogy, but I would say that TRT nowadays is kind of like the midlife crisis sports car for a lot of men. Well, I understand it, but it's exciting, right? And not everybody can afford the midlife crisis sports car. Economic crisis that we're in right now. But TRT is way more affordable and way more accessible to people, even for people that can self-prescribe it. So TRT for a lot of people, isn't going to be a quick fix to fix a lot of issues that they're facing, the libido issues and the lethargy and maybe lack of motivation or lack of focus. But you can address many of those things already by looking into other things. So maybe before you go into TRT, you look into optimizing your health and try to get more out of life by optimizing your lifestyle, right? Making better lifestyle choices. Maybe stop smoking, maybe stop drinking, maybe exercise a little bit more, maybe lower your body fat levels. Funny thing is, because testosterone aromatizes into estradiol in the body fat, if you lower your body fat levels, you probably have higher testosterone levels and lower estrogen levels. So now your body composition is better, and your energy and your libido and your overall sense of well-being is better also. So there's a lot of things you can look into before starting TRT. But in most cases, once you've optimized all those little lifestyle changes and you're maybe 25% better, then TRT is going to take that 25 to 200%. So for most men, it would still be a viable option, but there might be a couple steps that it will be best start with and resolve first before they go ahead with TRT, because then the outcome of TRT is better also.
What about so like, let's say someone that maybe they got the 25% body fat, they still have a lot of things to get in order, but they lack the motivation. I mean, have you seen, I imagine just getting on TRT in general might kickstart that, right? They start to feel a little
That's
better.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on the moment. Like if they're clinically androgen deficient, why torture them any further? You know, then I would definitely prescribe, to bring them at least to the middle top of the reference range, and then get that. And then of course later on you can consider other things to optimize their health further. So you raise their quality of life, improve their well-being, allowing them to reach their goals, getting their body fat down from 25 to 15, and maybe get more muscle mass, go to the gym more often, feel more focused, better libido. All those things are out of the way, allowing them to improve their quality of life in their lifestyle. And then later on, maybe the testosterone dose can go up a little bit, and maybe adding in something like a tesamorelin, like you mentioned in some of the questions. Or some other things to improve their quality of life, right? It can be a step-by-step process. Ideally, you want to earn it, right? Earn the TRT, earn the exogenous hormones. But again, if you're at a point where you're kind of miserable because your androgen levels are insufficient, then yeah, by all means, that'll be the first step that you take, and then the rest of the steps are going to be a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a journey. I mean, what you're on now today, or when you start TRT or HRT, is not what it would potentially be in 3, 4, or 5.
It's always evolving. Like you start somewhere, and then you still have to customize it. That's why it's good that you guys have so many patient care coordinators, because it's always a journey that you have to go under. You start here, maybe with a starting dose of testosterone, then later on something gets modified or changed, or maybe you do need an aromatase inhibitor. Or maybe you do need to change your injection frequency. And then as the body fat levels are coming down, maybe the aromatase inhibitor can be removed. Right? So there's always guidance involved. And then maybe in the course of 6 months, you can really transform your life and have a very individual and personalized protocol that you can then follow indefinitely.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I have, so I want to talk about neurosteroids, sex hormone, hormone ranges, maybe some just kind of myth busting as it pertains to these markers.
Yeah. So we can bust the myth about sex hormone-binding globulin. I think the bodybuilding forums kind of popularized this, and it even sprinkled over to the TRT forums, that free testosterone is the king of testosterone. Well, it's true to a certain extent, but you don't want to solely depend on free testosterone. There's many different pathways that your body relies on, and one of them is actually sex hormone-binding globulin. Now you have 2 transporter proteins in the blood. That's albumin, where estrogen and testosterone weakly binds to, so it can go in and out of the albumin, and then sex hormone-binding globulin. There's also an androgen binding protein, which transports testosterone from the testicles to the prostate, but it's only in a very local area. So it's very similar to sex hormone-binding globulin, but it's only localized to the testicles and the prostate. Now, the way people look at it is that albumin and sex hormone-binding globulin holds the testosterone hostage, and it can't do anything anymore. It's not true. You have to look at it this way. It transports testosterone and estrogens and dihydrotestosterone and other performance-enhancing drugs in the form of anabolic androgenic steroids. It transports them to tissue. So albumin and sex hormone-binding globulin are mostly made in the liver. And that's also where a lot of steroid hormones are metabolized. So when you take testosterone enanthate, for example, subcutaneous or intramuscular, it has to travel to the liver first, where part of the enanthate ester is metabolized, and the sex hormone-binding globulin can actually transport the testosterone through the bloodstream to skeletal muscle or the brain or anywhere else in the body. Now, it seems that in the brain responds better to free testosterone, not bound to SHBG, but skeletal muscle has a sex hormone-binding globulin receptor complex, where the sex hormone-binding globulin attaches to, and when testosterone or other androgens are attached to this SHBG receptor complex, it activates the androgen receptor through a different pathway. So now the testosterone that you take becomes more effective. But if you crush your sexual binding globulin with proviron, for example, or too much the DHT derivatives, then you lose out on this little extra pathway. So now you only get androgen-mediated gene transcription through the androgen receptor, but not this extra activation that comes through the sexual binding globulin receptor complex. So this is one of the myths that they had on the steroid forms and some of the TRT forms, to say crush your SHBG as low as freaking possible for the best libido, the best mood, the best anabolism, which can be further from the truth. You need to keep your SHBG in range, because otherwise you're missing out on this pathway. And this is where a lot of the libido issues are coming from nowadays. People take megadose proviron to crush their SHBG, and initially the libido goes up because free testosterone goes up, and then after a while the libido comes down because they miss out on this additional pathway that you need for overall well-being, anabolism, and libido. So this is one of the things that I think me, Derek, and you guys have actively trying to undo, like override,
Yeah.
in the medical and fitness community, because it's
with like estrogen, right? Like a lot of people thought they had to crush your estrogen levels, and if it's spiked down, it's causing you causing joint pain, and what are some other things that can happen if your estrogen levels are tanked?
I mean, estrogen has so many benefits. It's neuroprotective, it's cardioprotective, it regulates sexual binding globulin concentrations. It regulates your mood, empathy, right? Of course, you don't want your estrogen too high as a man, to the point to turn into a little bit of an emotional girl. So you want everything balanced, your estrogen balanced, your SHBG balanced, your testosterone balanced. Now, in many cases, we raise our testosterone to the top of the range or over it or way over it, in which case estradiol needs to come up to the top of the reference range and maybe over it a little bit. Now, it doesn't have to be phenomenally super physiological to the point you get terrible acne or water retention or gyno, but a little bit over the reference range when your testosterone is over the reference range, that's no big deal. It's in a better ratio this way. This also allows SHBG to be high. Now, you'll never get your SHBG super high. They will always come down because, again, with more androgens in the picture, you need more androgen delivery to tissue. So you'll be happy with an SHBG level around the middle of the range, maybe 20, 25 nanomoles per liter. And again, if your SHBG is too high on TRT, then maybe a low dose of proviron is warranted. But in many cases, it's not required. And then on the subject of the neurosteroids, when you downregulate your HPTA and LH and FSH secretion stops, your adrenal glands will no longer produce or will reduce the production of DHEA and pregnenolone. So even though they will still produce it to a certain extent, you see that in most cases levels decline. And as you get older, DHEA and pregnenolone levels go down as well, the same as testosterone and estradiol. But we all know that we need to supplement testosterone, which converts into estradiol, so we got that covered. But we all forget about the DHEA and pregnenolone. And now that ACG is so expensive and hard to come by, which also known to increase DHEA and pregnenolone levels, it's probably best just to supplement DHEA and pregnenolone in. And they're metabolized in the liver. You can take them sublingually to bypass that metabolism route. So if there's lozenges, is that the correct pronunciation? Lozenges? 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 I always get corrected in the conversation.
Yeah, troches are common.
Troches, right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best way to absorb DHEA and pregnenolone. And then you kind of have to figure out what your ideal dose is. So some people need 25 milligrams DHEA and 10 milligrams pregnenolone, and some people need double. Some people need even more if they've been on TRT or cycling for such a long time. And then the first time they realize, like, oh, wait a minute, I should check my DHEA sulfate levels. And they check them and they're like 80 or 100, way below the reference range. So maybe then you need to, backfill it with a higher dose. Same as what happens when people are vitamin D3 deficient. They need 10,000 IUs for a week or maybe even a month to restore their concentrations, and then they go back to a maintenance dose. And I feel it's highly beneficial. Everybody that I recommended DHEA and pregnenolone to, or at least a large majority, said that they notice improved cognition, well-being. There's a lot of hidden and small pathways that contribute to anabolism and glycogen storage and glycogen metabolism that DHA regulates in skeletal muscle. So you optimize your hormone balance so much by adding these two supplements in that, again, if you go on TRT, the testosterone, that also becomes more effective that way. And of course, DHA converts into testosterone, so you get higher levels also.
Yeah. Do those two always go together, DHEA and pregnenolone? Are those...
Pregnenolone. I feel that they do, because again, you downregulate testicular function unless you're on ACG. But if you're not on ACG, the only place of production of pregnenolone and DHA is the adrenal glands, and it's still quite low. Now, pregnenolone will convert into progesterone, and then allopregnenolone and pregnenolone. If you're on a finasteride, 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, or dutasteride, then you'll inhibit the conversion of progesterone into allopregnenolone. Sorry. So it might be beneficial to backfill with pregnenolone, but if you're on a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, you might need to supplement with allopregnanolone on top, because you're inhibiting the conversion. So that's why I always see that finasteride and dutasteride are kind of last resorts methods to control hair loss, because you're missing out on some of the pathways for this optimal hormone balance. So you're missing out on THD, which is what you want, right, to prevent hair loss. Yeah. But you're also, unfortunately, missing out on the allopregnanolone, which is also a contributing role in this neurosteroid and sex hormone balance. So I think everybody could benefit, but if you want to play it safe, you're already on TRT, and maybe you start with DHEA. Most people get better, notice a better effect from supplementing DHEA, and maybe you start with 25 milligrams and build your way up as needed, and then later on you add in pregnenolone if you so desire. Because in most blood works that I've seen, everybody's subclinical in their pregnenolone and progesterone levels. And you don't need much. Progesterone is more of a female hormone than it's required. You can tell by the reference ranges, but you still need a little bit just for optimal function. Right? You don't have to megadose the testosterone and then neglect all the other ones. You still need to keep them somewhat in check.
Okay. Well, let's jump into some of the Q&As. We, over the last weekend on the Marek Instagram, we asked our audience, our followers, hey, do you have any questions for Vigorous Steve? We have quite a few good ones, so I would like to just answer a few of those. Let's jump into one. I got balancing hormones with Gilbert syndrome. Is calcium D-glucarate? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, calcium D-glucarate.
Glucarate. Is that an option?
Yeah, that is beneficial, but so let's describe what Gilbert syndrome is. It's an inability to properly excrete bilirubin, which is a metabolic waste product of hemoglobin. So when you go on TRT, some people experience that their hematocrit and their red blood cells go up, because testosterone increases red blood cell production. Now, when you have more red blood cells, it means you also have more hemoglobin, which then ultimately needs to be metabolized into bilirubin, which then gets excreted in normal, healthy people through the intestinal tract. But when you have Gilbert syndrome, it doesn't get excreted properly. So there's two ways to kind of minimize this. Again, you have to make sure that you don't allow your red blood cell count, your hematocrit, to go up too much. So you stay away from boldenone and anadrol or anything else that's known to increase your red blood cells and increase the production of hemoglobin and requiring you to detoxify and metabolize bilirubin more. But you can also optimize the detoxification of bilirubin itself. So one of them is calcium D-glucarate, because bilirubin gets conjugated or glucuronidated and then excreted. That's marking for excretion. So you have, on your blood work, you can see this. You have direct bilirubin that's conjugated, or glucuronidated bilirubin that's marked for excretion, and then total bilirubin. So that's the bilirubin that comes from the hemoglobin or is reabsorbed in the enterohepatic recirculation. So when you excrete toxins from the liver through the gallbladder into the intestinal tract, it actually gets reabsorbed. So you produce almost 600 milliliters of bile acid, and this is what colors your stool brown. But a lot of that is reabsorbed. So I believe you produce 600 milliliters of bile acid, and only 30 milliliters get excreted. So this is the enterohepatic recirculation. A lot of bilirubin is excreted and they're reabsorbed, and then of course conjugated marked for excretion. The problem is in your intestinal tract, you have glucuronidase enzymes which metabolize the glucuronides of the bilirubin. So this allows it to be reabsorbed, and then this makes Gilbert syndrome worse. So calcium D-glucarate can actually prevent the recycling of glucuronides by the glucuronidase enzyme. I know these words, when you go really look into the medical literature, all these words are very, very similar, and you need a good day to really research it. So that's why we're recording this on StreamYard, so everybody can replay this as many times as they like. So calcium D-glucarate donates glucuronidase to allow the liver to conjugate and glucuronidate the bilirubin, send it through the gallbladder into the intestinal tract to excrete. This will improve Gilbert syndrome a little bit, but the best thing you can do is make sure you eat a lot of fiber to bind all the bile acids which contain the bilirubin, to allow that to pass through the stool. There's a medication called and I have it here in the closet. I can't remember what the medication is called. It binds up bile acid. It can raise liver enzymes a little bit. It's a sachet of 4 grams that you have before bed. I can't exactly. Sorry guys, I'll type it in the comment section somewhere down below. It's choline based, I believe. So it binds up the bile acid, including the bilirubin, allows you to detoxify it, so you can detoxify the bilirubin and all the other toxins better, but it does increase your liver enzymes. And then the last fun fact is that hydrolyzed casein protein contains a glucuronidase inhibitor, which prevents the recycling of conjugated bilirubin in the intestinal tract. So it inhibits the breakdown of bilirubin in the intestinal tract, so it doesn't get reabsorbed, promoting the excretion. And this is why hydrolyzed casein protein are given to infants that suffer from jaundice, because they recycle and reabsorb a lot of the bilirubin. So this is probably the best thing they can do if you suffer from Gilbert syndrome, is just to have some hydrolyzed casein protein in your diet, because it will actually inhibit the reabsorption and thus reduce the symptoms of Gilbert's. Yeah, I hope that explains it. Again, I'm no expert, so
yeah,
on this subject.
You have quite a good sense of it.
Yeah.
Between hydrolyzed casein and just regular casein protein.
I think the studies are performed on hydrolyzed casein. And I think maybe some of the amino acids uniquely inhibit glucuronidase in the intestinal tract from metabolizing other compounds, including bilirubin. The glucuronide, metabolizing that away, allowing it to be reabsorbed. So it just prevents reabsorption. So this is very, very beneficial in infants that suffer from jaundice due to high levels of bilirubin, and I'm convinced that it would help somebody with Gilbert syndrome as well. So supplemental calcium D-glucarate and supplemental hydrolyzed casein, which does have the evidence to support it, it should help quite substantially. Yeah. Now, will it resolve the Gilbert syndrome? I'm not exactly sure. I think prevention is part of the solution, and then some of these supplements are part of the solution. And again, you don't want too much glucuronidation, because otherwise you glucuronidate all the testosterone and the estradiol and everything else, and then you're also in a pretty bad spot.
Got it.
Yeah.
One of the other questions we have: what are some blood markers that are most negatively affected by dehydration?
Mostly the kidney-related markers. You see that uric acid goes up, and blood urea nitrogen, creatinine, the hematocrit goes up quite a bit, maybe with 1% or 2%. So So that's why I always recommend people to drink at least a liter, liter and a half of water before they go in for blood work. Now, if they time that with a urinalysis, which is what I always recommend, you can see in your urinalysis if you're properly hydrated. That's based on the specific gravity. So specific gravity is a marker on your urinalysis that measures the amount of particles in your urine compared to water. Water has a specific gravity of 1, and then anything over that indicates that there's more particles within the urine. So whether that's proteins, right, broken down proteins, or electrolytes, or other metabolic waste products, that's all part of the specific gravity. So the more you're towards the bottom of the reference range, let's say 1.003 or 1.008, then you're sufficiently hydrated for your blood work. And then the higher you go, 1.024, that's the top of the range, if I remember correctly, then you're dehydrated. So that's why I always combine a urinalysis with a blood work check. If your hematocrit is super high and your specific gravity is low, then you need therapeutic blood donation. If your hematocrit is high and your specific gravity is high, indicating dehydration, maybe you should hydrate first, then recheck your hematocrit and see if you actually need a therapeutic blood donation or not. Maybe your hematocrit comes down with 2 points. I've seen it happen. Hydration can be the difference of 2 points in your hematocrit. And then, of course, the creatinine will come down a little bit, and your blood urea nitrogen, your uric acid. But those 4 markers are predominantly affected by hydration. Yeah.
For staying hydrated, do you have a general protocol like water and sodium for an individual, or is it very individual?
It's very individual, and it also depends on how much you sweat. So, like, my hydration protocol is insane because I live in Thailand, and I follow ketogenic diet. So, if you're not eating carbohydrates, it's better to have more sodium to retain more fluid, because you're missing out on glycogen retention, which also retains water. So my sodium intake is like 6 grams per day, and my water intake is 10 grams. But that's me. I think everybody else needs to figure that out for themselves. But it depends on your activity level, how much sodium you're getting from your meals. And I think the most important thing for everybody is to keep their water intake and their electrolyte intake consistent on a day-to-day basis. And ideally, you get it so consistent that if you do go out for a cheat meal or a night out on just eating whatever, that you're not bloated the next day. You can be bloated from the carbs, but you shouldn't be bloated in the face or the hands or the ankles. That indicates a lot of mineral retention the next day. That just means that you're not controlling your electrolytes during the week. If you control your electrolytes and your water intake, you're always flushing because you're always providing enough electrolytes and enough water, so you're never retaining. And then when you do go out and you eat off plan, you're not retaining any of that either. You're retaining the carbohydrates, but not the electrolytes. And so pizza shouldn't make a dent. It shouldn't make you bloated the next day.
I'll remember that. It means I'm not very hydrated.
It's tough, but it does mean that you need to drink a decent amount of water and actually take a decent amount of electrolytes. So, and it's not uncommon for athletes to take like 5 grams of sodium. That's not sodium chloride, that's pure sodium.
Yeah.
Maybe 6,000, 8,000 milligrams of potassium, 2,000, 2,500 milligrams magnesium, and then maybe 1,500 milligrams of calcium. But that's not in the form of calcium supplements. That's all calcium coming from dietary sources.
Sure.
Yeah. And make sure you get your vitamin K with that, guys, to make sure that the calcium goes to the right spots. Yeah.
Okay. What's that dosage for that?
Vitamin K, I think it depends, again, on your activity level. I mean, 180 micrograms of vitamin K is what has been studied to be effective. But Gerald Formulas has a very good blend of vitamin K, MK, vitamin K1, K2, MK4, MK7. And that contains almost 2,000 micrograms of vitamin K in total of this blend. And that's the one I take. I take one a day. And I've been taking that, I think, since it came out. And my calcium score is 0.
It works.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
I've taken performance-enhancing drugs at pretty high dosages at times for 10 years straight. So my calcium score is still good, and I think it's the Gero formulas vitamin K complex that contributed to that.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do we got? We got another one here. How long for being completely off testosterone or exogenous testosterone before negative side effects kick in?
When you're off testosterone,
Hmm.
well, it kind of depends on the ester. So for TRT, most guys would recommend or use testosterone cypionate or enanthate because of the injection convenience. You don't have to inject it every day, but in most cases, it's still beneficial to inject every day because it's less of an injection volume and you control your estradiol levels better. Plus, you don't forget because it's a daily thing. If you stop these longer esters, in most cases, you'll still feel okay for 4 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks. But there will come a point in time where you feel like absolute ass. Yeah. And then in most cases, a post-cycle therapy is required. But if you were androgen deficient before you started TRT or cycling, then it's probably best not to do that. Or at least switch from TRT to ACG monotherapy or ACG alternated with HMG, which is part of most fertility protocols, or enclomiphene monotherapy. So at least you have some sort of method in place to capture this androgen deficiency and somewhat stimulate testosterone production. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine if you went from not feeling great, having low testosterone, to being on testosterone and actually getting the benefits, it'd be a hard sell to go backwards.
Yeah, this is why I always say that testosterone is, or going on steroids is kind of a lifetime thing. It's not necessarily that you need it, because your body, in many cases, it will bounce back to the levels you had before, and sometimes even better because the lifestyle has changed, right, during TRT, and but it doesn't feel the same, endogenous testosterone. So let's say you start at 300 nanograms per deciliter, but your lifestyle is kind of terrible. So you're not optimal, and that's why you have 300 nanograms. You go on TRT, you bring that to 1,000. You live your life for 5 years, right? And you really clean up your act, right? You stop drinking, you stop smoking, you get a six-pack, you get to the gym 5 times a week, your libido improves, everything improves. But you're tired of injecting. You're just so freaking tired of it. Yeah. So you want to come off. You come off, you do a post-cycle therapy. And under guidance, right? So you let your hormones decline. You've used ACG to sustain testicular function. You do some enclomiphene and maybe raloxifene or whatever else you need to bring your testosterone levels back. And now your testosterone is 600. So it's double. I've seen it happen. After 5 years on TRT, your testosterone levels come back double because you've used ACG on cycle and you've cleaned up your act. But you were on 1,000 or 1,200 for 5 years. So you're half of what you remember, but you're double of what you used to be. So in most cases, that guy will say, this is not enough. It's enough to get my wife pregnant. I'll tolerate it for 6 months to a year if I have to. But as soon as that first trimester gives me the green light, I'm back on TRT. So, and that's probably the same thing. Like I've been off cycle now for 3 months, and my testosterone came back to 400. Last time it came back to 600. And even though that's sufficient, it's not anywhere close to how I feel, even on the lowest dose of TRT.
Yeah.
You know?
Like we got another question here. What's your thoughts on SubQ injection versus intramuscular with TRT?
So I'm just going to start that experiment soon. Like I've been reading about subcutaneous injections for a long time. The only downside that I see with SubQ is that the oily deposits in some places take long to metabolize. So you get a little bit of this fat marble underneath the skin. Some people get a little bit of a redness or allergic reaction if they do it shallow intramuscularly. Of course, we all use the insulin needles. And if you're a little bit higher body fat level, because there's poor blood flow in the subcutaneous space, especially if you're this fat and you only pin it this deep, then it's very far from the blood flow. But if you're this lean and you pin it this deep, subcutaneous, like the depth of the insulin needle, then you're closer to the blood flow. So you don't get this redness or allergic response. A lot of people get an adverse reaction from benzyl benzoate or benzyl alcohol if you put it subcutaneous. Now, I feel that it goes away after time. And again, it depends on how much body fat you carry. That's the only issue that I have with it. Besides that, I think it's probably one of the better routes to go because you're not repeatedly jabbing your skeletal muscle, resulting in scar tissue building. So even when you use an insulin syringe into the skeletal muscle where you have more blood flow and it's better to absorb the steroids that you're taking, whether that's TRT or a real cycle, it's better to absorb the oil. You also create scar tissue. Now, in a year of cycling, that's not an issue, but a decade, it becomes an issue. And I wish this practice was around when I started. If I were to have an option to go full subcutaneous, I wouldn't have the scar tissue in my glutes that I have now, limiting my mobility and causing some knee discomfort because it just radiates through the IT band. So I paid an arm and a leg to have that removed with deep tissue massage therapy, and it's getting a lot better. But now, going back, if I had a time machine, I would probably do everything SubQ. So that's what I'm going to do when I start my cycle again. I'm going to do everything SubQ and then document that on my YouTube channel. But I think, from what I've seen with TRT, it creates the most stable serum concentrations. It doesn't create too much discomfort, besides maybe this oily bubble that gets left behind and the potential for redness if you're a higher body fat level. Very stable serum levels, minimal need for aromatase inhibitors, if any, right? Because your estradiol conversion is minimized. Because again, where you inject, it doesn't get aromatized there. It first needs to travel to the liver and other tissues where the enanthate ester or the cypionate ester is metabolized from the testosterone. And then it needs to travel back to the fat tissue where it can potentially convert into estradiol. So injecting subcutaneous doesn't mean you get more aromatization, you actually get less. So that's why I feel it's superior. So you get less need for aromacin or Remidex for that matter. Yeah.
So it would be daily SubQ, and you could do daily, I assume, or is it just estradiol? Or,
Sorry?
You do cypionate? Test cypionate?
Cypionate, enanthate, propionate. I think the carrier oil more contributes to the metabolism than the ester does. So if you use MCT oil, for example, like a lot of the compounding pharmacies that are good, they use MCT oil because it's easy to inject, but it's also easy to suspend the products in, the testosterone, enanthate, cypionate, whatever ester. It's reasonably easy to suspend them as MCT, so you don't need any or too much benzyl benzoate or benzyl alcohol to act as a solvent. So I feel that MCT is one of the superior carrier oils, but the downside is because MCT disperses so easily, it's probably best to inject that subcutaneously to reduce the absorption time. So if you use, let's say, 2 milliliters of testosterone enanthate in MCT oil and you inject that all into the glute, you get a lot of aromatization because the MCT oil disperses so fast that the testosterone enanthate can metabolize faster than a testosterone enanthate formula in castor oil, which has such a high dynamic viscosity rating that it takes forever to disperse and metabolize. So the carrier oil also contributes to how fast and how often you need to inject. So if you're on TRT, let's say you're doing 25 milligrams per day in an MCT product, and then subcutaneous is probably the best route to go. Right? That's generous TRT, that's 175 milligrams per week. But I think if you inject 25 milligrams test CYP or enanthate subcutaneously per day, you would have very stable serum concentrations, and you would still not need to use an aromatase inhibitor because, again, the levels are so stable.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for jumping on here, Steve. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to our relationship just to continue growing with Marek.
Absolutely.
And it's been awesome. far.
For sure. Thanks. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, tell everyone on our channel where they can find you.
So you guys can find me over at @VigorSteve on Instagram. Same for TikTok. I'm sure most guys are not on TikTok here. We're all way too intelligent for TikTok. But for social media, you still have to make one. Vigor Steve on YouTube, vigorsteve.com. Basically type in Vigor Steve and you can find me anywhere. And you head over to marekhealth.com/vigorous for my very extensive panel and soon to be made budget panel that's a little bit more affordable. So you guys can stay on top of your health also.
Awesome, Steve. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks so much. I'll see you soon.
Bye,
Take care, buddy. Ciao.